Next, on Currents News, young Catholic adults are turning to prayer in the wake of New York's abortion law. St. Patrick's Cathedral is the scene of a powerful vigil. President Trump prays for children at the National Prayer Breakfast. We'll hear what he said. Virginia officials are embroiled in growing controversy involving racism and allegations of sexual assault. How the scandals could shake up the state. Plus, he's been an important part of Brooklyn life for decades. Now, Michael Long is making a big change. The news starts right now.
It made me feel so hopeless and helpless.
A reaction to New York's new abortion law, but instead of giving up, young adults turn to their faith. Good evening, everyone. I'm Liz Faublas. The Catholics are praying for God's mercy at a special mass in St. Patrick's Cathedral. The vigil coming after the state cleared the way for abortions virtually without any restrictions. Currents News' Emily Drewby has that story.
Young people came together Wednesday night to pray for an end to abortion.
What happened in Albany on January 22nd, 2019, what happened at the Supreme Court on January 22nd, 1973, subverts the foundations of common life and culture.
A mass held at St. Patrick's Cathedral for young adults searching for a way to cope with New York's recently passed Reproductive Health Act.
I'm struggling a little bit with how I'm going to deal with it. You can pray and you can be angry and you can post on social media, but when it comes down to it, it's like Father said in his homily, we all have to figure out what we're going to do ourselves.
The bill does several things, but one of the most troubling to Catholics, it legalizes abortions up to birth in some cases. It has stirred up the late-term abortion debate across the country, even being mentioned during the State of the Union.
Lawmakers in New York cheered with delight upon the passage of legislation that would allow a baby to be ripped from the mother's womb moments from birth.
A recent Marist poll sponsored by the Knights of Columbus says 75% of Americans think abortion should be limited to the first 3 months of pregnancy.
If New York is going to become not the abortion capital of the U.S., but the pro-life capital of the U.S., it's going to be by Catholics and others working together to bring a culture of life to a place in which, unfortunately and tragically, the culture of death is celebrated.
One of my friends referred to it as grieving, and I realized that was what I was actually doing. Like, it really was heart-wrenching to me.
Young people who attended the Mass say during this trying time, being among other like-minded people is a comfort. In Manhattan, Emily Drewby, Currents News.
The abortion dispute between Cardinal Timothy Dolan and Governor Cuomo continues tonight with a new statement from Cardinal Dolan directed at the governor. In an op-ed yesterday about the new abortion law, Cuomo linked the cardinal to the religious right. The cardinal is responding on his blog, writing, quote, "This is something new from the governor. He did not consider me part of the religious right when seeking my help with the minimum wage, prison reform. Migrant workers, immigrants, and refugees. Debate abortion on what it is. Don't hide behind labels like right-wing and Catholic." If you want to contact Governor Cuomo directly and let him know your thoughts about the abortion law, here's his number, 212-681-4580. His office has responded to our invitation for him to appear on the program, saying they will let us know if the governor is able to participate. The president's call for a ban on late-term abortion faces an uphill fight in Congress, but several states are pushing ahead with their own bills. Republican legislators in Florida, Kentucky, Ohio, along with South Carolina, Tennessee, and Iowa are advancing measures that in some cases would outlaw abortions as early as 6 weeks into a pregnancy. Lawmakers in Iowa want to amend the state's constitution. The amendment would declare there is no right to abortion in the Iowa Constitution. The proposal was debated last night at a packed subcommittee hearing. A pro-life supporter expressed why abortion should not be a protected right in the state.
Push this resolution. Give these unborn babies a chance to make a difference.
The resolution passed out of the subcommittee 2-1. The proponents believe the amendment would withstand court scrutiny. The uproar in Virginia that began with Governor Ralph Northam's support for aborting babies even after birth is taking several new turns tonight. And the scandals could lead to a shakeup in how the state is governed. Omar Jimenez reports.
All three of Virginia's top officials are facing pressure to resign.
Well, hello, Democrat.
Let's start with Virginia Governor Ralph Northam, who said Friday night he was in this photo that appeared in his 1984 medical school yearbook. He now insists he's not in that picture, but did admit to wearing blackface.
That same year, I did participate in a dance contest in San Antonio, in which I darkened my face as part of a Michael Jackson costume.
Northam has no plans to resign, but if he did, he would be succeeded by Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax, who now faces a sexual assault allegation. Quote, what began as consensual kissing quickly turned into a sexual assault. Mr. Fairfax put his hand behind my neck and forcefully pushed my head towards his crotch, claims Vanessa Tyson, whom he met at the 2004 Democratic National Convention. Fairfax released a statement in response, reading in part, at no time did she express to me any discomfort or concern about our interactions.
Do you think Mark Herring should resign?
Then there's Virginia Attorney General Mark Herring, the next in line to the governorship, admitting Wednesday he too appeared in blackface at a party in 1980.
This has obviously been an extraordinarily challenging week for all Virginians.
And within these controversies are heavy political implications as well, since the third in line to the governorship is a Republican, which would flip control of the governor's mansion. Omar Jimenez, Currents News.
President Trump is continuing his campaign against late-term abortions. At this morning's National Prayer Breakfast, he vowed his administration will protect religious liberties at home and fight religious persecution abroad. He also asked the assembled religious and political leaders to pray for a future where every child has a warm, safe, and loving home.
Let us always give thanks for the miracle of life, the majesty of creation, and the grace of Almighty God.
The president also defended faith-based adoption centers, saying his administration wants to help vulnerable children find their forever families while following their deeply held beliefs. As the latest migrant caravan is closing in on the U.S. border with Mexico, the president's border wall, his former policy of migrant family separations, and more are under a spotlight today. The Democrat majority in the House is launching a round of new investigations. Mary Maloney reports on the latest, starting at the border.
Troops stand guard as a massive migrant caravan arrives at the U.S.-Mexico border.
We've come in search of something better for our family.
Nearly 2,000 people want to seek asylum and enter the United States through Eagle Pass, Texas. But U.S. Customs and Border Patrol says it can only process 16 to 20 people per day.
At this point, the system is at a total capacity.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott sent about 500 state troopers to the border, and the Pentagon moved about 250 military members to the Eagle Pass area. Border security is a sticking point for Congress and the president. A funding deal needs to be reached by next Friday before part of the government shuts down again.
We need border security. We have to have it. It's not an option. Let's see what happens.
Lawmakers are also looking into the Trump administration's zero-tolerance illegal immigration policy, which forced thousands of migrant children from their families at the border.
I do not believe that separation of children from their parents is in the best interest of the child.
Last year, the government said more than 2,700 children were taken from their parents at the border. But this year, a Health and Human Services Inspector General report found that number was wrong, and thousands more families were actually separated.
To be clear, what happened to these children should never happen in this country.
Mary Maloney, Currents News.
The latest now on the crisis in Venezuela, a new call for Pope Francis to intervene.
Cuando las personas regresaban a sus casas,
That's opposition leader and self-declared President Juan Guaido. He's saying, quote, I make an appeal to everyone who can help us, like the Holy Father, like all the diplomacies in the world, to collaborate in bringing the usurpation to an end and producing free elections in Venezuela as soon as possible. Guaido added, we would love a visit from the Pope. This is a very Catholic, very devout country. His plea mirrors one from Venezuela's strongman Nicolas Maduro for the Holy Father's help. Francis has said he'll consider the request. At the same time, Maduro's regime is blocking a key bridge linking Venezuela to Colombia. The barricade stops humanitarian aid from reaching the Venezuelan people. Maduro rejected international help, saying, "We are not beggars." A top American cardinal is hoping that a new season of healing is coming in response to the clerical sex abuse crisis. Cardinal Daniel DiNardo heads up the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. For more on what he's saying, we're joined by the national correspondent for the Tablet and Crux, Christopher White. Christopher, what can you tell us?
Thanks, Liz. The Cardinal's remarks at the Catholic University of America yesterday focused on the role of the laity in responding to the crisis. He echoed ideas that have come from Pope Francis's looking forward to a new season.
In such a season, we will live more fully the universal communion we share through the Eucharist. As the Holy Father pointed out, at this moment in the Church, we are suffering not just from abuse crisis and its cover-up, which we are, but also from ideological divisions, which are hurting the body of Christ.
Cardinal DiNardo is speaking out in advance of the highly anticipated sex abuse summit at the Pope's convening at the Vatican later this month. Liz?
Christopher, with that said, is the Vatican trying to downplay expectations for this summit?
Well, Liz, it's a bit of a mix. On one hand, the Pope is saying, look, we don't have a single sort of silver bullet solution that is going to solve the global crisis of sex abuse. But he does have strong expectations. And, the conference is divided around three major themes: responsibility, accountability, transparency. And the major expectation, which is big, is for all the participants from around the globe to come into this meeting and to go home and say, this isn't a problem in America, Ireland, Australia, and it's a global problem, and we have to find global solutions to this.
All right, Christopher, of course, we await the meeting with anticipation. Thank you so much. There's a lot more news headed your way. A lifelong Catholic leader in Brooklyn, Michael Long, is closing one chapter of his life and beginning another. Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio is here to talk more about the implications of the Child Victims Act with Ed Wilkinson in this week's Into the Deep. Plus, Pope Francis is facing a big challenge this upcoming Lenten season, one that will have an impact on animals around the world. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. Tonight, the Cathedral Club, the Catholic lay organization for the Brooklyn Diocese, is honoring a man who has devoted his life to Brooklyn, both in the faith and at the ballot box. Michael Long is being recognized for his years of service. As Currents News' Tim Harfman reports, he's also about to make a big change.
Thank you very much.
Michael Long, an active Brooklyn Catholic leader, is making a big change in his life. After 3 decades, he's giving up the job as chairman of New York State's Conservative Party.
I intend to stay involved. I just don't want to drive the bus. I'm going to get on the bus and go for the ride. I don't want to steer the bus anymore.
That bus includes almost 160,000 passengers, New Yorkers registered in the Conservative Party.
My hope is that the Conservative Party will continue to be the common sense voice, certainly here in New York. If ever there was a time that the conservative voice is needed in New York State, it's now.
A former U.S. Marine turned business owner, Mike Long's public career also included representing Brooklyn on New York's City Council. He first caught the political bug in 1964.
I was standing on street corners giving out literature. I was driving my car with bullhorn on top of the car, urging people to vote for Barry Goldwater.
Now Mr. Long looks forward to spending more time with his family. Wife of 54 years, Eileen. Their 9 children, 23 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren. Mrs. Long says that while politics put a crimp in celebrating family events, she always was behind what her husband was doing.
He believed in what he was doing. It was not for any financial gains, no heroism or anything else. He believed in it.
For Mike Long, nothing is more important than his Catholic faith, and he'll continue to stay on as chairman of the board at Holy Angels Catholic Academy in Bay Ridge. He grew up in Queens and was a parishioner of Holy Child Jesus Church in Richmond Hill. That's where his strong Catholic roots were planted.
I'm not afraid to enunciate my views. not forcing those views on other people, but I think the views that the Catholic faith professes, especially on life issues, is very important.
This champion of the sanctity of life has always been forthright in sharing what the church has taught him with family and friends.
He always said to them, you have to do what's right. Whether anyone's looking or not, that's what you have to do.
And that's how Mike Long hopes people will remember him.
A person who stood up for principle, who was reasonable, was willing to be flexible and compromise, but not at the cost of losing one's values and belief system.
In Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, Tim Harfman, Currents News.
1 out of every 10 Americans will suffer sexual abuse before turning 18 years old. The wrongdoing taking place in many institutions, both public and private. Now, because of New York's Child Victims Act, survivors will have more time to file civil lawsuits against abusers. The legislation has a controversial history. In tonight's Into the Deep segment, Bishop DiMarzio discusses that with Ed Wilkinson. Ed.
Thank you, Liz. This week we're going to talk with Bishop DiMarzio about the Child Victims Act, which was recently passed here in New York State. And Bishop, this is a bill that has gone through the legislature and it's passed, and it's been opposed by the church for many, many years. And recently we dropped our opposition to it. Can you explain why we dropped our opposition?
Well, there's a few reasons. First of all, at least now it's clear that all victims of child abuse are being covered. In the past, that was really not clear, or certainly not legislatively clear. We had a judge look at the law, and her opinion was this did not cover anyone but institutions that are not public. And that would be, I think, unfair to the victims, would single out especially the Catholic Church. We know we've had victims, and we have settled many, many cases with people. We did it on a basis of a moral responsibility, not a legal responsibility, because it has to be, people don't understand that we only knew about 14% of the cases before 2002, when the period of our supposed cover-up happened. You can't cover up what you don't know. The rest of the 86% of the cases came in after 2002. So it is a difficult thing for people to put their hands around. The church was unaware of the number of victims. Nobody ever reported it, not to the church, not to the public officials. It just was people live with it. And now that they had a chance to come out with our reconciliation program, now we know about it, and we compensated them. Not that money is going to make the difference, but at least it acknowledges that something happened to them, that happened within the realm of the church. And although we feel we're not legally responsible, we're helping them get the counseling they need and to move slowly to be able to deal with the issues of the past.
Even after the bill was passed, though, the governor and the Cardinal Dolan, seemed to get into a war of words, and the governor blamed the Catholic Church for holding this bill up for all these years.
Yeah, it's really not true that we held it up all these years. There was disagreements. The fact of the matter is that there's things in the bill we don't particularly like that could be improved, but the bill was passed without one hearing. This is not the way government works most places. Only in New York do you have things pushed through in a couple of days. No hearings, no ability to maybe tweak a legislation that could be made better. This is the problem here. This is a slam dunk situation that is not good for government. It's not good for people, and it's not a good way to run a government.
How do you think this is going to affect the diocese itself right now?
Well, we don't know what effect. We know what we've done, and it's been very costly, and there's a lot of sacrifices. But the church does not have an infinite amount of money. What we do one way, then we can't do something else in another way. The charitable works that we do, the initiatives that we'd like to do, we cannot do if we have to compensate people for these past problems that we didn't know anything about, really. So that's going to be the future. We're going to have to do less.
Yeah, the Cardinal has said that the governor should be very wary that not to try to put the Catholic Church out of business, in effect, that the Catholic Church does a lot of things in New York State, but if it doesn't have the funds to do it, it may not, you yourself said the Brooklyn Diocese could go bankrupt over this.
Well, it's true. We don't know what will happen. They insisted on putting it into the court system, which is a litigious situation. Our reconciliation program was more on a friendly basis. Let people present their case, verify it, and then receive some compensation without having to go to court, without having to provide the kind of proof that you need in a courtroom. It's a big difference. So they refused to do that. Again, lack of hearings, lack of looking at the situation. We did get 2 legislators in our district from Brooklyn to listen to the victims that were compensated by this program, but didn't make any difference. That they weren't able to influence the legislation.
Bishop, thanks very much for your thoughts on that. And Liz, we're coming back to you now.
All right, thank you, Ed, and Bishop DiMarzio for that very valuable information. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops established what is known as the Dallas Charter in 2002 to combat and prevent sexual abuse. Some of the measures include creating the Office of Victim Assistance to help individuals who come forward with allegations of abuse. The office provides counseling, referrals for therapy, and other important resources. Every employee of the Brooklyn Diocese, including students, undergoes mandatory training designed to spot the signs of abuse and how to stop it. Bishop DiMarzio meets with survivors and listens to them carefully. One result of those talks is the annual Mass of Hope and Healing in the diocese. The diocese also has a toll-free and confidential sexual abuse reporting line. That number is 888-634-4499. And for more information, go to the Diocese of Brooklyn's website, dioceseofbrooklyn.org, and click on Protecting Our Children. Still to come on Currents News, Pope Francis is facing a big challenge for Lent that could help animals find out what's involved. And the post office is paying tribute to heroes on 4 legs. We'll be right back. They're 4-legged heroes, and the U.S. Postal Service is rolling out new stamps to honor them. The stamps will feature 4 breeds of dog commonly used in the armed forces. There are currently about 2,300 working dogs on U.S. bases worldwide. Their heightened sense of smell and size make them essential for many operations, including search and rescue missions. Dogs have served in the U.S. military since World War I. Pope Francis received an interesting challenge to complete during Lent. The company $1 Million Vegan has launched a global campaign to raise awareness for animals suffering in the livestock industry. In an effort to support the campaign, 12-year-old activist Genesis Butler dared the Holy Father to follow a plant-based diet during Lent.
If he agrees to go plant-based, we'll give $1 million to the charity of his choice. Farming animals for food has a greater impact on global warming than the fuel emissions from every car, bus, train, ship, and plane on the planet combined.
The proposal is inspired by Pope Francis's Laudato Si encyclical, in which the Pope proposes a lifestyle change in order to help save the planet. We shall wait and see if he accepts the challenge. That is Currents News. I am Liz Faublas. Thank you so much for being with us, because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.